The cold woke me before the smell did, and the smell woke me before I understood where I was. Something plastic crackled under my cheek. My mouth tasted of copper and the particular chemical sweetness of whatever they had put in my tea. My fingers would not close around anything solid, and when I finally forced my eyes open, there was no ceiling above me, only a strip of black sky boxed in by brick on 3 sides, and the outline of a dumpster lid propped against my shoulder like a door someone had shut on purpose. I had been thrown away. Not metaphorically. Not the way I'd said it to Nadia over vending machine coffee 100 times, half joking. The way you say a horrible true thing so it stops being able to touch you. I had been carried out a service door, folded into a garbage bin behind Voss Continental's loading dock, and left among the coffee grounds and the shredded paper with my wrists zip-tied loosely enough that no one would call it kidnapping if they found me breathing, and tightly enough that I would not be believed if I said otherwise. 6%. The number arrived before my own name did, the way numbers always arrived for me, uninvited and complete. Container 4471. Declared weight 11,200 kilos. Actual weight closer to 11,940. 6%. Dressed up as a rounding error, repeated across 41 shipments over 14 months. I had built the spreadsheet in my head before I ever dared build it on a screen, because screens could be searched and heads could not. Not until someone cut mine open, which felt lying in a dumpster behind the building where I'd worked 11-hour days for 3 years, like a real and current possibility. My name is Wren Calloway. I am 26. I presented Omega at 16 in a school gymnasium in front of 40 other students, and the Alpha girls had laughed at how small the wave of scent was, how apologetic, as if my own body had already learned to take up less room than it was owed. I have been an indentured compliance analyst at Voss Continental for 3 years, bonded under a labor contract that exists because Omegas without an Alpha household are still, in this city, considered a credit risk worth securing against, and because my mother's hospital bills did not care what I thought about that system. Delphine Voss had told me, the week I signed the contract, that I should consider myself lucky. She had looked at me over the rim of a coffee cup the color of her own eyes, pale and cold and faintly amused, and said, "You're not much, Miss Calloway, but you're tidy. And tidy is useful, the way packing paper is useful. Useful until it isn't." I had written that down in my private notebook that night, not because it hurt, though it did, but because I already understood, some animal part of me understood, that a woman who tells you what she thinks you're worth is also telling you, in advance, what she plans to do when she decides you've stopped being worth it. She had decided 3 hours ago. I knew because I could still feel the tea going down wrong, still feel Delphine's hand cool on my shoulder as she said, "Drink it, you look tired," in the voice she used on people she had already finished with. I tried to sit up, and the dumpster tilted a half-inch under my weight, groaning, and somewhere above the brick walls a foghorn sounded twice, low and enormous, the sound of the harbor breathing. My hand found something small and hard buried in the lining of my coat pocket, my mother's wren pin, tarnished silver. Wings slightly bent from the year I'd worn it every day and forgotten it was fragile, and I closed my fist around it the way you close your fist around the one true thing left when everything else has been declared trash. That was when I heard the footsteps, not hurried, not searching. A slow, deliberate tread on wet asphalt, boots that knew exactly how much weight to put down and where. And under it, before I even understood I was smelling anything at all, a scent arrived in the alley like a held breath finally let go. Black pepper and cold iron. The kind of cold that isn't absence of heat, but a decision about it. I had never smelled an alpha like that in my life. The footsteps stopped at the mouth of the alley. I heard a car idling somewhere beyond it, low and patient, and then the footsteps started again, closer, and a shadow folded itself down into a crouch beside the dumpster, and a voice said, "There's someone in there." I could not answer. My throat had gone the way it always went under fear, closed to a seam, and so I did the only thing my body would still do, which was open my fist around the pin and let the last of its shine catch whatever light there was, a small, stupid signal flare, and pray that whoever this was had better instincts than the last people who'd decided what I was worth. The lid came off in one motion, and cold air and colder light fell in on me, and the woman looking down into the dumpster went very still in a way that I would come to know over the following weeks as the stillness she wore instead of shouting. "Get her out," she said, not to me. "Now, and find out whose building this is." Hands found me. Not rough, not gentle either, simply certain. The way you'd move a piece of furniture you had already decided belonged to you. I registered gray eyes, a coat the color of wet slate, hair pulled back hard enough to look like armor. I registered that when she lifted me clear of the bin, she did it in one motion, no strain in it at all, and that the pepper and iron scent around her had shifted, gone sharper, gone furious, though her face stayed carved from something colder than stone. 6%, I said, because it was the only sentence left standing in my head, and my voice came out in a wreck of a whisper. 41 containers. 6%. The woman's eyes came down to mine and did not look away. "What's your name?" she said. "Wren." My mouth was thick, slow. "Wren Calloway." "Wren Calloway." She said it back to me like she was filing it somewhere it would never be lost again. "You're going to be all right. I don't leave things where I find them." Behind her, another voice, a woman's, clipped, alarmed, said, "Katrin, that's the Voss loading dock. That's Delphine's building." And the woman holding me, the one whose scent had already rearranged the air of the whole alley around some private and terrible decision, said only, "I know whose building it is," in a voice gone so quiet and so flat that I felt the words land in my chest before I understood I ought to be afraid of them. That was the first time I heard the name Katrin Ashworth. I did not yet know that half the harbor called her the Steel Tide, that grown men who ran shipping empires 3 states over changed meeting times rather than cross her without warning, that the last person who had truly angered her had lost his company inside a fiscal quarter and never worked in the industry again. I only knew that her hands were steady and that the pin was still warm in my fist, and that for the first time in longer than I could remember, someone had looked at me and decided, on sight, that I was not garbage. I did not know yet that Delphine Voss would not survive the next dawn as the woman she currently was. I only knew that somewhere behind us, a service door I had been carried through 3 hours ago swung once in the wind and clicked shut, and that the sound of it followed me all the way into the car. The car smelled like leather and cedar polish, and underneath that, like her, pepper and iron, banked now, deliberately banked. The way you damp a fire so it wouldn't singe the person you were carrying. I came back to myself in stages, the give of the seat beneath me, a blanket someone had draped over my shoulders without asking, the low murmur of a radio dispatch Katrin Ashworth answered in 3 clipped sentences that ended someone's night shift and started someone else's investigation. My wrists still bore red lines from the zip tie. She had cut it with a folding knife from her coat before we'd even reached the car, without comment, the way you'd remove a splinter you intended to discuss later. "Talk to me," she said, not looking away from the road. "Stay with your voice." "What were you saying back there?" 6% of what? I should not have answered. Every instinct that 3 years under Delphine Voss had beaten into me said stay quiet, say nothing that can be traced back. You are replaceable, and replaceable people who talk end up replaced faster. But the numbers were still moving in my head like water looking for a drain, and this woman's scent had not spiked with cruelty once since she'd pulled me out of that bin, and something in me that had been folded very small for 3 years decided, recklessly, to unfold. Cargo weights, I said. Voss Continental underdeclares by an average of 6% across a specific manifest pattern. 41 containers I can name from memory. Dates, weights, route codes. It's been running 14 months. I found it 11 days ago. Her hands did not move on the wheel, but the air in the car went very still, the particular stillness of a woman recalculating an entire plan in the space between 2 heartbeats. You found it, she said. And then you ended up in a dumpster on the same loading dock as the fraud. I told her I found it, I said. Delphine, I thought. I thought if I brought it to her directly instead of the harbor authority, she'd fire me and dock my contract, and it would be the worst of it. I thought I was being loyal. My laugh came out broken, no humor in it at all. She gave me tea, and then she threw you away like packing paper, Katrin said. And something in her voice on that last phrase made me turn and look at her properly for the first time. Because I had never told her those words, I had never said them out loud to anyone but my own notebook. And yet she'd reached for that exact image like she'd been carrying a matching one her whole life. You know her, I said. I know her, Katrin agreed, and offered nothing further, and I did not push, because the muscle along her jaw had gone tight enough to look load-bearing, and some things a person only gives you once they trust you not to drop them. We came off the coastal road and up through a private gate that opened for the car without anyone touching a button, into a drive lined with black pines, and the building that rose up out of the dark ahead of us was not a penthouse so much as a fortress with better windows, glass and pale stone 40 stories tall, Ashworth Maritime lit in restrained letters along its crown, the kind of building that did not need to shout because everyone in this city already knew its name. This is your building, I said stupidly. This is my home, she said. The building's 4 blocks south. Come inside before you say anything else that makes me want to turn this car around and finish what I started in that alley. Warmth, not threat, ran under the words, though I would not learn to hear the difference in her voice for another week yet. Inside, the penthouse smelled of cedar and rain-washed stone, and a man with silver hair and an apron dusted in flour appeared from a hallway before we'd even crossed the entry, took one look at me, blanket, torn stockings, the raw red at my wrists, and disappeared again without a word, returning moments later with a mug of something that turned out to be chamomile and, absurdly, exactly right, orange peel steeped soft into it. The way my mother used to make it when I was small and frightened of thunder. Pruitt makes tea for everyone who comes through that door upset, Katrin said, watching me hold the mug like it might vanish. He has a gift for guessing what people need before they know how to ask. I drank it in small, careful sips, while a woman with cropped dark hair and a scar through one eyebrow came in, took one look at me, and turned the full weight of her attention on Katrin instead. The loading dock's Vosses, the woman said. Confirmed, security footage from the block shows a service door opening at 11:40 and closing at 11:51. No plate on the van, but I'd bet my pension it's theirs. Wren, this is Odessa Marsh, Katrin said. She runs security for the company and has opinions about everything, most of them correct. Odessa, this is Wren Calloway. She's staying here. Odessa's eyebrows went up, just slightly, in a way that told me this sentence carried more weight in this house than its 4 words suggested. Staying, Odessa repeated. Staying, Katrin said, in the tone of a woman closing a ledger, and did not look away from me when she said it, and something about the steadiness of that gray gaze made the chamomile taste less like comfort and more, for the first time in 3 years, like safety. I woke the next morning in a bed with sheets so fine they felt like water, in a room the size of my mother's entire apartment. And for one long, disoriented moment, I thought I had died and someone had misfiled me into the wrong afterlife. Then I smelled cedar smoke and coffee somewhere beyond the door, and pepper and iron layered faintly over both of them, and I remembered. And my hand went instinctively to my coat, hung over a chair, and found the wren pin still in the pocket where I'd shoved it. I held it against my chest until my pulse slowed. Odessa found me an hour later, standing at the window in borrowed clothes, 3 sizes too big, looking down at a harbor I had walked along 1,000 times from the wrong side of the glass. "She wants you to see something," Odessa said. Not unkindly, but not warmly either. A woman withholding judgment until the evidence came in, before you decide whether any of this is real. She led me down 2 floors to an office with charts on every wall, shipping lanes, tonnage projections, a framed photograph of a young woman with Katrin's same gray eyes, laughing at something outside the frame, a black ribbon looped discreetly around one corner of the frame that I did not yet understand the weight of. Katrin stood at the window with her back to the door, and when she turned, her face had none of last night's careful blankness left in it. Voss Continental has been trying to buy out 3 of my smaller contracts for a year, she said, without preamble. Underbidding routes at a loss, which only makes sense if the shortfall's being made up somewhere else. I've suspected fraud for months. I could never prove the pattern. Her eyes went to me, steady, assessing, almost, though I did not trust the word yet, hopeful. "You just handed me 41 containers of it from memory in the front seat of my car." "I can give you more than the numbers," I said, and the words came faster now, the old habit of proving my usefulness before anyone could decide I had none. "I can give you the falsified customs codes, the shell brokers she's routing the difference through, the account she's using to cover a debt I don't fully understand yet. It isn't operating capital, it's something personal, something she's hiding even from her own board." "How do you know that?" "Because I built the compliance reports she's been forging her signature over," I said. "I know what her real numbers look like. I've known for 11 days. I just didn't have anyone I trusted enough to bring them to." Something moved behind Katrin's eyes, gone almost before I caught it. Not triumph I would come to understand, but recognition, the specific ache of a woman who has spent years being the only competent person in every room, finally meeting someone who could stand beside her instead of behind her. "Delphine will already be building a story," she said. "By noon she'll have filed a report that you embezzled from her personally and fled the city. She'll make you the criminal before you can make her one. That's how she survives. She moves first." "Then we move first," I said, and my own boldness startled me even as I said it. Katrin almost smiled. It changed her whole face, briefly, into something younger and less armored, and then the smile folded itself away again, back into the steel tide's careful stillness. "I will not let anyone throw you away again," she said. "Not her, not this city, not anyone." She said it the way she'd said everything else since the alley, flat, certain, a fact rather than a promise, which somehow made it land harder than any promise could have. "You should know what that means before you agree to stay in this house. It means war with Voss Continental. It means your name in the papers before this is finished. It means I don't do anything by half measures, and neither, apparently, do you." I thought of Delphine's cup, pale eyes over the rim, tidy, useful, until it isn't. I thought of the zip tie, of the dumpster lid, of 11 days of carrying 6% of a lie around in my chest alone because I had no one left to give it to. I've spent 3 years being tidy and useful and quiet, I said. I'd like to try something else. Odessa, in the doorway, made a small sound that might have been approval. Katrin crossed the room and stopped an arm's length from me, close enough that the pepper and iron scent settled warm around us both, close enough that I felt, for the first time, the specific electric charge of an alpha holding herself very deliberately still. Then, let's go to war, she said, and held out her hand. And I took it, and neither of us let go for a long moment after the handshake should have ended. The friction started the moment the household staff realized I would be staying past breakfast. Not cruelty, nothing so crude as what I'd left behind at Voss Continental, but 100 small recalibrations, the kind that told me exactly how far outside this world I had always stood. A junior aide corrected my grip on a crystal water glass without meaning to be unkind. A tailor arrived to measure me for clothes and murmured, not quite low enough, that the fabric budget alone exceeded what I'd earned in a year. I ate dinner that first week at a table longer than my mother's entire apartment, under a chandelier I did not dare look up at, for fear my neck would betray how unused to such rooms I was, and I understood, with the particular clarity of the recently thrown away, that surviving Delphine Voss had not prepared me at all for surviving Katrin Ashworth's world. Katrin noticed. Katrin, I was learning, noticed everything. "You've eaten 4 bites, she said on the 3rd night, not looking up from a folder of shipping manifests. Pruitt will take it personally. I don't know which fork, I admitted, because lying to her felt somehow more exhausting than the truth. I don't know how to sit in this chair like I belong in it. I keep waiting for someone to tell me I've overstayed. Katrin set the folder down. For a long moment, she studied me the way she studied the manifests, with total unhurried attention, and then she stood, walked around the table, and pulled the chair beside mine out instead, sitting close enough that our shoulders nearly touched. "There's no wrong fork in my house," she said. "There's no overstaying. I decided you belonged here the moment I pulled you out of that alley, and I don't reverse decisions." A pause, weighing something. My mother ran this company before me. She taught me that control was strength. Every meal in this house, growing up, was a performance. Correct fork, correct posture, correct silence. I used to think that was love. It took me a long time to understand it was just fear wearing a good suit. Her eyes flicked to mine, uncharacteristically unguarded. "I don't want to teach you that kind of fear. Eat with your hands if you want to. I'd rather you were fed than correct." It was, I would realize much later, the first time she had told me anything true about herself without my asking. I found my footing, slowly, over the days that followed, not by learning which fork, but by discovering the parts of the house that had nothing to do with performance. The kitchen, where Pruitt let me help chop vegetables and told me, unprompted, about the young mistress of the house who used to steal his ginger snaps as a girl before he caught himself, and went quiet in a way that made me not ask further. The greenhouse on the 40th floor, glass walls fogged with condensation, where I found Katrin one evening standing among rows of orange trees she had apparently planted herself, hands in the soil, alone. "You garden," I said, startled into stating the obvious. "I like things that grow because I fed them, not because I frightened them into it," she said, without turning. "It's the only part of my day no one can put in a shareholder report," I told her, standing there among the orange trees, about the lighthouse near my mother's old house on the coast road, the one I used to climb to as a girl before my father died, and the money ran out, and everything narrowed down to hospital bills and a labor contract. I told her about a blue fairy tale book with a broken spine that I'd read so many times the glue gave out that I'd had to leave behind when we moved because there was no room in the car for anything that didn't have a price tag someone could collect. I did not know, telling her, that I was handing her a map. I only knew that for the first time in 3 years. Someone was listening to me the way you listen to something you intend to keep. She reached over, without asking, and brushed a smear of greenhouse soil from my wrist, and her thumb lingered a half-second longer than the gesture required, and the pepper and iron scent around her warmed by some fraction I felt more than smelled. "May I?" she said, low, and did not finish the sentence, and did not need to. "You may," I said, and she pressed her mouth, briefly, to the inside of my wrist, right over the fading zip tie mark, as if she meant to overwrite it with something gentler, and the whole greenhouse seemed to hold its breath around us. It was Odessa who broke the moment, appearing in the doorway with a face gone tight and careful. "Katrin," she said, "you need to see the morning edition, and there's a call from the Harbor Commission holding on line 2. Delphine's filed." Katrin's spine straightened by degrees, the greenhouse warmth folding itself back behind the steel tide's armor even as her hand found mine and held it, once, hard, before letting go. "Filed what?" she said. "Embezzlement," Odessa said, and her eyes went to me with an apology already loaded into them. "Against Wren. Sworn statement, 40 pages, filed at 6 this morning. Delphine says she has proof. The Harbor Commission's summons arrived by courier before noon, and I read Delphine's statement standing in Katrin's office, with my own name typed across the top of it like an accusation. Miss Calloway, in a pattern of deception spanning 11 months, diverted company funds through a shell account, forged internal audits to conceal the theft, and fled the premises the night her scheme was discovered. Attached to the filing were 3 printed emails, headers intact, dated and time-stamped, each one carrying language I recognized because I had written similar sentences 100 times in my actual job, except I had never written these, never sent these accounts to a routing number I had never seen before. "They're fabricated," I said, and heard my own voice go thin. "The formatting's right because she's had 3 years of my real emails to copy from. But I never wrote these. I never touched that account." "I believe you," Katrin said, before I had even finished the sentence, flat and immediate, the way she said everything she meant absolutely. "The commission won't," I said. 40 pages, sworn, time-stamped, and I'm the one who vanished the same night. It looks exactly like guilt fleeing the scene. Katrin came around the desk and took the pages from my hands before I could keep reading them, set them face down, and held both my shoulders until I looked at her instead of the paper. "Then, we don't argue paper with paper," she said. "We give them something paper can't fake. You said you remembered 41 containers by heart. Prove it. Every route code, every date, every weight discrepancy. Put it on record before she has time to build a second wall around the first lie. And if they don't believe a compliance officer who allegedly stole from her own employer, they'll believe the woman who found you," Katrin said, and something in her tone made my chest go tight, because I'm about to tell them exactly how I found you, and exactly whose loading dock you were found on, and exactly what that dumpster reeked of when I pulled the lid off it. Her jaw set, hard. "Delphine built this filing to bury you before you could speak. She didn't count on you having a witness who owns more of this harbor than she does." I should have felt relief. Instead, a colder thought arrived, quiet and precise, the way all my worst thoughts arrived. "She moved this fast because she's afraid of what I know," I said slowly. "Not the shipping fraud. Something bigger. The debt I told you about, the one the shortfall's covering. What if the smuggling isn't the whole story? What if I only found the smallest room in a much larger house?" Katrin went very still. The alley stillness. The stillness that meant she was recalculating everything at once. Then, by morning, she said, "We're going to need to see the rest of that house." That night, the house did not stay quiet. I woke to the low percussive thud of something striking the perimeter fence a quarter-mile from the greenhouse, and by the time I'd pulled a robe on and made it into the hallway, the corridor lights had shifted to the amber security wash Odessa had shown me on my first tour, the one that meant the grounds had gone to lockdown. Katrin met me at the top of the stairs, already dressed, already armed with nothing but the particular cold focus that told me the steel tide, not the woman from the greenhouse, had come back out to meet whatever this was. "Stay behind me," she said, and I did not, quite. Because Odessa's voice crackled over the comm a second later. 3 men, service entrance. One carrying a case Odessa's software had already flagged for accelerant, and some old 3 years under Delphine instinct in me recognized the shape of what this was before either of them said it aloud. "They're not here for the house," I said. "They're here for the server room. My testimony's useless if the backup files I copied last week disappear tonight." Katrin's eyes cut to me. "Sharp you copied files." "The night I found the 6%, I said. I didn't trust anyone at Voss Continental with the originals, so I mirrored what I could onto a drive and mailed it to myself here, general delivery, before I ever confronted her. I didn't tell you because I didn't know yet if I could trust you either." The confession came out raw, honest, and I watched something in Katrin's face crack open at it rather than close. "It's not at the office. It's in my coat. It's been in my coat this whole time." Below us, glass broke, the sound small and distant, and absolutely wrong in a house this fortified, and Odessa's voice snapped through the comm again. Tighter now. Katrin took my hand and pulled me not away from the noise, but toward the stairwell that led down into it, and I understood, running beside her, both palms slick with fear and my mother's pin biting into my closed fist, that whatever this crisis cost us, it was about to burn away every careful distance either of us had left standing between the other. We came down into the security corridor as 2 of Odessa's people were already dragging the second intruder toward the holding room, and the third, younger, panicked, the accelerant case abandoned somewhere behind him, froze dead at the sight of Katrin coming down the last flight with her scent gone jagged and furious enough that even I, an Omega with no combat instincts to speak of, felt every hair on my arms rise in answer. "Voss sent you," Katrin said, not a question. The boy, he could not have been older than 20, looked between her and the drawn weapons at his sides, and made, wisely, the only decision that would let him see morning. She said there'd be files, backup drives. She said burn the room, and it wouldn't matter whose name was on the deed. She was wrong, Katrin said, and something in the flatness of it made the boy flinch harder than a shout would have. It was over inside 3 minutes. Odessa's people were, I would learn, very good at their jobs, but the aftermath left the corridor thick with adrenaline scent, mine sour with old fear, Katrin's sharp enough to taste. And when the last of the intruders had been walked away and the alarms finally cut to silence, we were left standing together in a hallway lit only by the amber emergency wash, both of us breathing hard, close enough that the space between us had gone electric. "You could have been killed," Katrin said, low, rough in a way I had not heard from her before. "If they'd reached that server room while you were in it, I wasn't in it," I said. "I was with you. You shouldn't have to be with me to be safe in my own house." Her hand came up, not quite touching my jaw, hovering there, asking permission the way she had in the greenhouse, the way she asked for everything. "Tell me to stop, and I will." "Don't stop," I said, and closed the last inch of distance myself, and when her mouth found mine, it was nothing like the careful, restrained brush of the greenhouse. It was hunger held on a very short leash, her hands framing my face like something she was terrified of breaking, and unwilling to let go of either. And I felt, under the pepper and iron heat of her, my own scent rise warm and unhidden for the first time in 3 years, quince and toasted vanilla filling the amber-lit hall until neither of us could have pretended, even for politeness' sake, that this was anything less than what it was. We stood there a long time after the kiss ended, foreheads together, her thumb tracing the line of my jaw like she was memorizing it against some future loss she refused to name aloud. I have spent 6 years building a life no one could set fire to, Katrin said, quiet, almost to herself. Tonight, someone tried to burn it down over a drive in your coat pocket, and the only thing I could think, the whole way down those stairs, was that I could not lose you before I'd even told you I wanted to keep you. The scars came out slowly, over the days that followed the fire that never fully caught, first hers, then mine, traded back and forth in the low hours between midnight and dawn like currency neither of us had ever been allowed to spend before. She showed me, one night in the greenhouse with rain sheeting down the glass overhead, a thin white line along her collarbone she'd carried since she was 19. The year her mother decided a public demonstration of discipline mattered more than a daughter's trust. She used to say control was the only inheritance worth passing down, Katrin said, tracing the scar herself as though it still ached under certain weather. I believed her for a long time. I ran this company the way she taught me, cold, closed, untouchable. I told myself it was strength. Her eyes found the framed photograph she kept in the office downstairs, the laughing young woman with Katrin's same gray eyes. My sister Marisol never believed it. She used to say I was just afraid of what would happen if I let anyone close enough to leave. What happened to her? I asked, gently, already dreading the answer in the way you dread answers that explain too much at once. She drowned, Katrin said. 8 years ago. Official reports said a boating accident off the eastern pier. A long pause, the rain filling it. I have never been able to prove it, but I have always believed Delphine's father arranged it, to remove a rival heir who was about to expose his own smuggling operation, the same operation, restructured, that Delphine is running now under a different name. Marisol was an omega. She was gentle and funny, and she deserved 100 years, and I could not save her. And I have spent every year since telling myself that if I never let anyone matter that much again, I would never again feel this specific kind of helpless. Her hand found mine among the orange leaves. Then I opened a dumpster lid and found you holding a wren pin like it was the last true thing in the world, and I understood I had been lying to myself the entire time. Control was never the strength. It was just armor over the same fear my mother wore. Loving someone enough to lose them, that's the actual courage. I didn't want it. I want it now. I told her, in turn, about my father's death and the debt that followed it like a second funeral, about signing the labor bond at 23 with my mother's hand shaking in mine in a waiting room that smelled of antiseptic and fear. About 3 years of making myself small and tidy and useful because useful people, I had believed, at least got to stay. I told her about the lighthouse, properly this time, about the exact color the water turned at low tide, about my mother's laugh before the debt wore it down to something quieter. I told her I had stopped, somewhere in those 3 years, believing that anyone would ever choose me for anything except what I could calculate for them. I'm not choosing you for your memory, Katrin said, when I'd gone quiet, her voice fierce and low. I'm choosing you because you walked out of a dumpster reciting fraud figures instead of screaming, because you trusted me with a secret that could have gotten you killed twice over, because you make Pruitt laugh and you talk to my orange trees like they can hear you, and because when I am near you, the worst parts of this city feel very far away. Her forehead dropped against mine again, that habit already worn smooth between us. I don't say things twice that I mean the first time. I am saying this once, and I mean it entirely. I love you, Wren Calloway. Not the ledger. You, I could not answer in words for a long moment, so I answered instead by pressing her palm flat over my racing heart, and felt, through the thin wall of my own ribs, her scent bloom warm and unguarded around us both, and understood that whatever Delphine Voss had meant to do to me in that alley, she had instead delivered me somewhere I had never once let myself imagine I was allowed to belong. The warmth lasted 4 days. On the 5th, Odessa came into the breakfast room with her face already arranged into the particular, careful blankness she wore when the news was bad enough to need managing, and set a tablet down between us without a word. The footage was grainy, clearly recorded on a phone held too close, but there was no mistaking the woman in the frame, my mother, in the care facility 3 counties north. In a wheelchair I had spent 2 years' wages ensuring she'd never need to sit in without proper staff nearby, and standing behind her chair, one hand resting with theatrical gentleness on her shoulder, was Delphine Voss. Ellen, Delphine's voice said from the recording, sweet as poisoned sugar, has been under my company's medical sponsorship for 3 years, as you know. It would be such a shame if a change in your daughter's employment status affected her coverage. I do hope Wren comes to her senses and returns what she's stolen before this facility has to make any difficult decisions about continuing care. My mother, in the chair, did not understand what was happening. She smiled at the camera the way she smiled at everyone now, gentle and slightly lost, and said something about the weather, and the video ended there, 11 seconds of my mother's confusion weaponized into the cruelest sentence Delphine had ever constructed. I do not remember standing up. I remember the chair hitting the floor behind me, and Katrin's hand closing around my wrist before I could do something with my body that my mind had not yet caught up to, and my own voice coming out in a register I did not recognize. She'll kill her, I said, not with a knife. With a form. A denied claim. A missed dose. She'll do it so quietly no one will ever be able to prove it was murder, and my mother will just stop, the way people stop when the system decides they're not worth the paperwork anymore. She won't get the chance, Katrin said, but for the first time since the alley, I heard something in her voice buckle under its own certainty. Not doubt in the outcome, but fury so absolute it had briefly outrun her words. Odessa's jaw was tight. Delphine's called an emergency session with the Harbor Commission for tomorrow morning. She's going to preempt the embezzlement inquiry by presenting herself as the victim of a bonded Omega who stole from her out of resentment and then colluded with a business rival to destroy her reputation. She's framing this, Odessa said, and here her eyes flicked to Katrin with something like an apology as a coordinated attack. By you. Against her. Let her frame it however she wants, Katrin said, and her voice had gone past fury now into something colder and far more dangerous, the tone I imagined boardrooms had learned to fear over 15 years. I have spent 15 years being called cold, ruthless, untouchable. Every rumor Delphine Voss has ever spread about me was true. And she is about to discover exactly what that means when I stop being careful with it. Katrin, I said it quietly, my hand finding hers, feeling the tremor under the stillness. If you go after her the way you want to right now, tonight, you become exactly what your mother taught you to be. Cold, untouchable, alone in it. My voice shook, but I did not let go of her hand. I need you to win this. I need my mother safe by morning. But I don't want to watch you become someone I'll have to grieve for even after you win." Something in her face broke and reassembled itself, slower this time, deliberate. "Then tell me what you need," she said. "Because I would burn this entire harbor down for you, and the only thing stopping me is that you just asked me not to." I closed my eyes, and the numbers came, the way they always came, uninvited and complete, not the fraud figures this time, but a plan, whole and cold and mine. "I need the original files," I said, "not the mirrored drive, the actual account ledgers, the ones Delphine thinks she erased when she wiped the server. I know where a second backup exists because I built the compliance system myself, and I never trusted her enough to only keep one copy." I opened my eyes. I need to walk back into that building tonight, and I need you to make sure I walk back out. The Voss Continental Tower stood dark except for a single lit floor when we arrived a little after 2 a.m. Odessa's people already stationed at every exit Katrin's intelligence had mapped over the preceding hours. Katrin herself beside me in the service stairwell with a scent gone hard and watchful, banked, but not gone, ready. "The server room's on 9, I said, low. "The real backup's not on any server at all. It's a drive taped inside the drop ceiling above my old desk." Behind a panel, I loosened myself the week I found the discrepancies, because I never once believed I'd get to keep the original safe any other way. We moved through floors gone unfamiliar in the dark, past the desk where I had eaten 11-hour lunches alone, past the glass-walled office where Delphine had once told me I was tidy and useful, until we reached the drop panel and I stood on a chair with Katrin steadying it, my hands shaking as they found the taped edge of the drive and pulled it free. That was when the lights came on. Delphine Voss stood in the doorway in a robe the color of arterial blood, flanked by 2 men I recognized from the loading dock footage, her pale eyes moving from me to Katrin, with an expression that took a full 3 seconds to shift from surprise into something far more dangerous. "Delight, Katrin Ashworth," she said, savoring the name like a wine she'd been saving. Breaking and entering. In my building. With my former employee, who I understand has been telling stories about a rescue. Her gaze slid to me, and her mouth curled, packing paper, coming back for a second act. "How industrious of you." "You threatened her mother," Katrin said, and her voice had gone past the boardroom cold into something with no bottom at all. "You drugged an Omega under your own labor bond and left her to die in a dumpster. You murdered my sister 8 years ago to cover the same operation you've been running under a new name ever since. Tonight ends that, Delphine, one way or another." Something flickered behind Delphine's composure, the first true crack I'd seen in 3 years of knowing her, before she smoothed it back into place. "Marisol Ashworth drowned in an accident," she said. "You've never had proof of anything else, because there isn't any. And as for your little Omega," her eyes cut to me, venomous. "She'll be arrested for corporate espionage before sunrise, and no shipping queen in this city will be able to buy that away, not even you." One of the men beside her shifted his weight, and I saw, in the terrible slow-motion clarity fear sometimes grants, his hand move toward something at his belt, and I heard myself shout Katrin's name a half-second before he moved at all. And Katrin was already there, already between us, taking the blow meant for me across the shoulder with a grunt she swallowed rather than let free, driving the man back into the wall with a force that ended the confrontation before it had properly begun. "Now we're even," she said to me afterward, breathless, blood at her collar. When I'd finished checking, the wound was shallow, and Odessa's people had Delphine's men face down on the floor. "You handed your whole future to me in the front seat of a car. I'll take one blade for you and call it a fair trade. Delphine, backed now against her own desk with nowhere left to retreat to, laughed, a brittle, disbelieving sound. "You'll both regret this," she said. "By morning I will have destroyed." "By morning," Katrin said, closing the distance until she stood directly over her, close enough that Delphine's composure finally, visibly, failed. "You will be finished. Not by my hand, by hers." She nodded at me, at the drive still clutched in my fist. "I could kill you tonight and no jury in this city would convict me for it. I want you to understand that I know that, and I want you to understand what it costs me not to." Her eyes flicked to mine, and something in my face, I do not know what, only that it was enough, made her step back. "But she asked me not to become you. So instead, you're going to stand in front of the Harbor Commission this morning and watch everyone you've ever looked down on hear exactly what you did." The Harbor Commission's emergency hearing convened at 6 that morning in a chamber with tall windows already going gray with approaching dawn, packed with reporters Odessa had quietly informed the night before. Board members from half the shipping houses on the coast, and near the back, pale and stiff and clutching Nadia Cho's hand for support, my mother, who Katrin's people had collected from the care facility hours earlier under an armed escort my mother would later describe, delighted, as the most exciting thing to happen to her in a decade. Delphine arrived flanked by lawyers and composure she'd clearly spent the drive over rebuilding, and for the first 10 minutes of the hearing, that composure nearly held. She spoke of a resentful, bonded employee, a jealous business rival, a conspiracy dressed up as compassion. She was, I would admit even now, extraordinary at it, sweet-voiced, wounded, utterly believable to anyone who had not spent 3 years learning the exact shape of her lies. Then the commission chair turned to me and asked me to present what I had. I stood, and my hands did not shake, because for the first time in 3 years I was not asking anyone's permission to be believed. I gave them the 41 containers from memory, dates and weights and route codes falling from me in the same complete, uninvited certainty they always arrived in. And then I played, from the recovered drive, 11 months of Delphine's own internal communications, her own voice authorizing the falsified declarations, her own signature on the shell accounts Nadia had helped me trace to a personal gambling debt Delphine had been servicing for 6 years. I told them about the alley. I told them about the tea. I told them, my voice breaking only once, about the video of my mother in her wheelchair and the threat wrapped inside it like a gift. By the time I finished, the chamber had gone utterly silent, and Delphine Voss's lawyers had stopped writing. It was Katrin who delivered the final blow, standing to address the commission with the full cold weight of 15 years behind her voice, laying out, with documentation Odessa's investigators had assembled through the night, the connection between Voss Continental's current smuggling routes and the operation her own father had run 8 years earlier. The operation that had ended with a young Omega woman drowned off the Eastern Pier and ruled an accident by a coroner's office that had, curiously, received a substantial donation from the Voss family that same fiscal year. Delphine broke on the second question about her father's records, the composure finally completely failing, and what came out of her in the next several minutes was not quite a confession so much as a collapse, old grievances, old debts, old cruelties tumbling out faster than her lawyers could stop them, until even the reporters in the back row had gone still with the particular hush of watching a woman's whole architecture come down at once. The commission's decision, when it came, took 11 minutes. Delphine Voss's operating license was suspended pending federal investigation. A warrant was issued before she'd even left the building. My name, and the fraudulent filing against it, was struck from every record that had carried it. Outside, the sky had gone the pale gray gold of true dawn, and as two harbor authority officers led Delphine Voss out through the chamber's tall doors and restraints, Katrin's hand found mine. And I felt, more than heard, the low, satisfied exhale that ran through her at the sight. By dawn, Katrin said quietly, watching the car pull away with Delphine inside it, "She's gone." I did not answer with words. I answered by turning into her. In front of the reporters, in front of the commission, in front of my own mother's watching, delighted face, and kissing her the way I had wanted to, since the greenhouse, without any careful distance left between us at all. And when we broke apart, Katrin's forehead against mine, her voice came low enough that only I could hear it. "Ask me with your words," she said. "Tell me you want this. All of it, not just the rescue. I want all of it," I said. "I want you. Ask me too." "Will you let me claim you?" Katrin said, formal suddenly. Careful, the words costing her something visible. "Not tonight, not rushed by any of this. Whenever you're ready. I am asking, not assuming." "I'm ready," I said, and felt the truth of it settle through me whole. I have been ready since an alley smelled like pepper and cold iron, and I finally understood someone had come looking for me instead of leaving me behind. That evening, in the quiet of the penthouse with the harbor gone violet beyond the windows, she asked me one more time, formally, her mouth at the curve of my neck, her breath warm over the scent gland she had been so careful never to touch without permission. "Tell me to stop, and I will." "Don't stop," I said, and she didn't. And when her teeth closed gently over the mark, sealing something between us that no court filing and no cruelty could ever again unmake, the bond that opened in me felt less like being claimed and more like, finally, completely being found. The proposal came on a Tuesday 6 weeks later in the greenhouse among the orange trees, because Katrin Ashworth did not believe in performances she did not mean, and there was no room in the whole tower she trusted more than the one where no shareholder report could reach us. She knelt, the steel tide, who had not knelt for anyone in 15 years, went down on one knee among the soil she tended with her own hands, and produced a small worn box that turned out to hold not a diamond but my mother's wren pin, cleaned and repaired, its bent wing straightened by a jeweler Katrin had sought out weeks earlier without telling me, the tarnish polished away until the silver caught the greenhouse light like something newly made. "You handed this to me the night I found you," she said, without a word, the only thing you'd managed to hold on to through everything that had been taken. "I had it repaired because I wanted you to have back what was always yours before I asked you for anything of mine." She opened the box further, and beneath the pin sat a plain silver band. "Wren Calloway. You were never packing paper. You were the only true weight in every room I've stood in since the day I found you, and I would like the rest of my life to prove that to you, one ordinary morning at a time. Will you bond with me? Properly, in front of everyone who's ever doubted either of us?" I said yes before she'd finished the sentence, and Pruitt, who had been hovering unsubtly by the greenhouse door with what he would later insist was simply a watering can, wept openly enough that Odessa had to hand him a handkerchief. The ceremony came 3 months after that, on the eastern pier that Katrin had once been unable to walk without grief closing her throat, now hung with lanterns and ringed with harbor families who had once feared her, and now, cautiously, had begun to love her instead. Nadia stood beside me as my witness, having left Voss Continental's wreckage months earlier for a position at Ashworth Maritime she'd more than earned. My mother, steadier now under care no longer weaponized against us, sat in the front row in a wheelchair polished to a shine, wearing an expression of undisguised joy. Odessa gave the toast, gruff and short, the way she did everything. In 11 years working for this family, she said, raising her glass, I have never once seen Katrin Ashworth cancel a shareholder call for anyone. She canceled 4 this month for a woman she found in a dumpster who turned out to be smarter than the rest of us combined. If that isn't proof enough for the room, I don't know what is. Delphine Voss, we learned that same week, had been convicted on 14 counts, her assets seized and redistributed to the harbor workers her fraud had underpaid for years. Her father's old case reopened at last, with new evidence Katrin's investigators had finally been able to substantiate. She would serve her sentence, the papers said, at a facility 3 states inland, as far from any harbor as the courts could arrange, and I found, standing on that pier in my wedding dress, that I felt no triumph in the news at all, only the quiet, settled relief of a door finally, permanently closed. A year on, the greenhouse held a new addition among the orange trees, a small reading nook Katrin had built without asking, stocked with a fresh copy of a blue fairy tale book with an unbroken spine, because she remembered everything I had ever offhandedly mentioned wanting, and made a private mission of returning it to me, one gift at a time. From its window, if you angled yourself just right, you could see clear across the water to a lighthouse Katrin had quietly arranged for the harbor authority to restore. Its light running again for the first time in a decade, sweeping the dark the way it had swept the dark of my childhood, except now I got to watch it from a home no one could take from me. On the morning this story ends, the sun came up gold over the harbor, and I found my wife already awake in the greenhouse, coffee in hand, watching the light climb the water the way she'd once told me she watched it every morning she couldn't sleep, a habit from grief that had slowly, gently become a habit of gratitude instead. She turned when she heard me, and her eyes went, as they always did now, to the wren pin at my collar, catching the first true light of day. I had spent 3 years believing I was tidy and useful and easily discarded. I had spent 1 terrible night in a dumpster believing I had been proven right. I understand now that being thrown away was never a verdict on my worth. It was only ever a verdict on the people too small to recognize it. The right hands, when they finally find you, do not measure what you are worth. They simply refuse, from that moment on, to let you be discarded again. The end.